Thanks so much all for joining. We're just building a critical mass of participants coming online, and we'll start in just a moment. Once again, welcome to our discussion today. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Wade Crowfoot, and I lead our Natural Resources Agency. And today, my most important job is hosting one of our Secretary Speaker Series. This is an event, a convening, a discussion that we hold more or less on a monthly basis, where we bring leaders, big thinkers from across California to talk about emerging issues, priorities, topics of interest. And it's a great opportunity to bring folks together and talk about issues in ways where we have a little bit more time than this 5 minutes or that 5 minutes. So we're going to spend an hour with leaders here today. Let me just say that past topics have really elevated the importance of the inclusivity of our workplace. And so today is going to be a really exciting conversation with women leaders across our agency who are leading the way on coastal and ocean protection. We have had in the past discussions, including last month to celebrate Black History Month, where we had conservation leaders, Black conservation leaders, really talking about the African-American experience in the environmental movement and talking about how we build our partnerships across communities to strengthen the inclusivity of the work we do. Well, today we get to celebrate Women's History Month in this conversation with these remarkable women leaders who we have with us today. So we're going to jump in. I joked as we were coming online that we're in sort of a Brady Bunch view, and it's really going to be an interactive discussion here today. My colleague Gita will be providing links on our speakers in the chat function. So if you open up your chat, Gita is going to populate that with links and interesting information that tracks the conversation. You also have an opportunity to ask questions or share thoughts that I can integrate into the conversation throughout the discussion. And you can do that by clicking on the Q&A button. We are recording this conversation, and after about a day or two, we'll have this on our website. So if you want to share this conversation with others, please feel free to do that. So let's dive in. I want to introduce who we have on the line or on the screen here today. So if you would, once I introduce you, just give a wave. I think we're all well identified with our names. But starting with Jen Eckerly, my colleague here at the Natural Resources Agency. Jen was appointed by the governor very recently as our Deputy Secretary for Oceans and Coastal Policy. She is also the Executive Director of our Ocean Protection Council. We have Amy Hutzel, who has taken the helm of the California Coastal Conservancy, which is a huge and important institution across California, improving our coast. We have Jennifer Lucchesi. Jennifer leads our State Lands Commission, which is an entity led by constitutional leaders like our Lieutenant Governor and Controller that manages state-owned lands across the state. She'll talk a little bit more about that. We have Dr. Kate Huckelbridge, who leads the Coastal Commission. And Kate has served as a leader within the Coastal Commission for a long time and ascended to the executive director role earlier this year. We have Melissa Miller-Henson. Melissa, give a wave. Melissa leads our Fish and Game Commission, which is critically important to a lot of the protections that we have on our coast. We have Effie Turnbull Sanders. Effie, give a wave. Effie serves on the California Coastal Commission, and particularly in a slot that's focused on driving environmental justice, and was critical in the establishment of the first ever environmental justice policy at the Coastal Commission. And then we have my colleague, Nowaki Schwartz. Nowaki was a deputy director at the Coastal Commission until just recently, when the governor appointed her to lead within our agency as the Deputy Secretary for Equity and Environmental Justice. So all thanks so much for joining. Oh, and Mars, Gosh, I almost forgot Mars. How can you forget Mars? Mars is one of the primary leaders, not only in California, but across the country in coastal and oceans protection. And if you follow her on social media, you understand how many important conversations she's in on a monthly basis around the world. So Mars, thanks so much for joining us. And it was really important to include Mars because most of us here work in state government, and we'll talk about the institutions that we lead. But it's also really important to understand the work we do happens in partnership with groups and leaders outside of government. So hopefully, Mars, you can bring in that your perspective from outside of government leading ASUL. So let's start off the conversation by just sharing how this discussion came together. Jen Lucchesi, I think the origin story of this discussion was a work trip that you and I and Jen Eckerly were on to the Central Coast to address Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant and the future of the lands there and the coastal property. And you had referenced the fact that you actually all had connected to reflect on the fact that coastal institutions, 5 critically important management agencies that protect our coasts and oceans, for the first time are being led by women. And how interesting and cool that is, and important. So Jen, just want to, if you could, just share a little bit of that story.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I've been at the State Lands Commission as executive officer since 2012. And then before that, I started as an entry-level land agent in 1999. And I had recently come across a photo from the early 1990s that showcased the executive directors of the Coastal Commission, BCDC, the State Lands Commission, along with some leaders in the Natural Resources Agency and the Attorney General's office at that time. And they were all sitting around a conference table. And I was told that they called themselves the Coastal 8, and they were all white men. And it really made me reflect on how far we've come, especially in the last couple of years with the leaders that you all see on the screen today, and just how grateful and excited I was to be a part of this group of really strong women protecting our coast, and how significantly things have changed over the years.
And Jen, what do you think is the importance of women, having women leaders across these agencies, and what does it mean for cultivating more diverse leadership in the State Lands Commission, but also just across the state government?
Yeah, I think we need to be very sensitive and cognizant that we're talking generalities right now about women, but gender is really a social construct that we have to face straight on, because it's such a foundation of the division in our society, really, but that it's a very fluid concept. So there's a lot of nuances, and I want to make sure that we're sensitive to all that, even though we're talking in generalities here. I would say that, especially in light of Women's History Month and International Women's Day, the foundational concept in all that is inclusivity and embracing our diversity and learning from our individual and collective shared experiences, and always striving for a more equitable, healthy, and thriving future, especially for our children and our children's children. And so at the State Lands Commission, we are historically an oil and gas agency, which is obviously very male dominated. So when I think about the State Lands Commission's future, I think about its role in addressing our climate crisis head on and really facilitating that energy transition that we so desperately need at this time. Yeah.
Well, Kate and Amy, I think you all are, fairly new in your roles, leading institutions that were led in the past, I think, exclusively by men. Maybe Kate first, and then Amy. Just reflect on a little bit about your journey, working within and sort of upward through the institution, and really now where you find yourselves.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I've been at the commission about 14 years, and similar to Jennifer, I have come from the energy world, so I really focused a lot of my early career in energy, which is and has traditionally been a male-dominated field, but that's really changing, and that's been interesting to see on that side. Coming, I think as an agency, the Coastal Commission itself is really it's changing itself. We are really becoming a more diverse organization internally. Our staff, we have an amazing commission that is also predominantly female at this point. And that is an exciting transition for all of us in the midst of all this important work we need to be doing. And I think it brings, similar to what Jennifer said, sort of a diverse perspective to the work and that important work that we're doing to make sure that we are approaching our work with this inclusivity. I really liked that concept that Jennifer brought up, and making sure that we are creating spaces on our coast that are inclusive to all, so I think that the increasing diversity of our staff, and we also need to be bringing in more people of color to this space as well, because that is traditionally, this has been a white field, and we really are working to kind of reverse that to an extent, and really try to do a better job of reflecting the people that we serve in California and beyond.
Absolutely. I want to turn to Effie briefly, because Kate, you lead the staff doing the critically important work of the Coastal Commission. And then Effie, you serve as one of the governor's appointees on the actual body. Can you reflect on just what you've seen change and hopefully grow over time on the Coastal Commission regarding these issues?
I mean, where do I begin? I'm looking at, in the squares that I see above me, Mars and Milwaukee. And I remember when we were huddled up in my office at one point, literally redlining and drafting the environmental justice policy together. And that combination of working with commissioners, staff, and trusted community partners is something that has been a transformational change within the commission that I'm really excited to have seen happen. And Dr. Huckelbridge was really at the forefront of a lot of that work, particularly with tribal consultation and championing that. And so I think we went from an agency that was more kind of technically based and really great on general environmental issues, and now to an agency that takes environmental justice as a key core issue. We have implemented training, anti-bias training across the board. As Dr. Huckelbridge mentioned, our staff has become more diverse. But I think most important is that I think the public really feels like there's an opportunity to weigh in significantly, and there's an opportunity and now a tool with the environmental justice policy to be able to address some of these historic challenges that we've faced that are the result of years of neglect and also intentional discrimination and racism, whether you're talking about redlining, or you're talking about urban renewal, where you have neighborhoods in Los Angeles, for example, like the Boyle Heights neighborhood that's crisscrossed by 4 or 5 freeways, and lots of property having been taken by eminent domain and then repurposed for public use that unfortunately meant a lot of times infrastructure that was detrimental to the communities that lived there. So I see a tremendous change, and I'm really looking forward to working closely with Dr. Huckelbridge to kind of bring in that next era and keep building on it.
Absolutely. Milwaukee, I want to get your perspective. Both Kate, Dr. Huckelbridge, and Effie, as leaders of the commission. I think you came to the Coastal Commission focused on communications and then really ascended into the deputy director role. Just interested in how you perceive that change in the institution and what it means to actually have women, leaders of color driving the institution, and then what kind of perspective do you bring to the agency-wide work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, just looking around this room, it's just really, or this virtual room, it's really inspiring to be here. And I know at the commission, I think the staff is now, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, about 2/3 women. And so there's a lot of women in leadership positions at the agency, and that's not unusual to see. And, we definitely, I think across California, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of just, making sure that there is more diversity in our leadership team. But I think, things are really changing, and we're seeing a lot more staff of color coming through the door now, in this particular coastal field, which is really wonderful. And I think, to the question of what I'm bringing to the resource agency, I mean, I think part of it is, having worked at a department for 8 years, I think I have a good understanding of what staff are really kind of dealing with it at various departments. But I also really look at things through, this equity and EJ lens. And, as Effie said, we spent probably a good 2 years, just working with, working on our EJ policy and working with staff and working with people like Mars. I mean, Mars, I remember, there was like a moment when you kind of ran up to me and we were huddled together trying to figure out whether we could legally do something. And then, pulling, I mean, it was a really kind of exciting time, right? And just really kind of building something from the ground up and working with our other, key staff on this and really trying to create something that would be lasting and really influential. And, we're still kind of on the forefront of these policies. I think there's only 3 EJ policies across all the resource departments. And the commissions, I think they're sort of really at the forefront of seeing, what this policy can do. And I'm really kind of excited to bring that same energy to the resource agencies and see, what we can do in the next 3.5 years. And I have some ideas that I'll be talking to you about later, Wade.
Yeah, I'm ready for them. Mars, you've been invoked a couple of times. If you would, for those who don't know you, you lead a remarkable organization, and share a little bit of sort of your journey, your professional journey to lead this organization, what you guys do, and then how you figured in with these different leaders as allies or collaborators.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me. So for the purposes of here, I also will say that my affiliation is that I have the privilege of working with Amy Hutzel on the Coastal Conservancy.
Oh, of course.
As a board member there. But I have worked with mostly, I think, everybody here. If not just with Dr. Huckleberry, because she's new, but I've had the privilege of working with everybody here throughout the years. And I will say that it's been my work there, my experience that kind of like launched the idea of Azul. I remember, back in the day when we were all still learning and having these ideas through a previous process, that I saw this need to figure out how my community would actually be part of this. I was like wondering, how would my mom get here? How would my cousin, how would my neighborhood, et cetera. And so that's how I started doing this work. And I started Azul back in 2011. And it's been exciting to see that change with at all levels of government. And by no means is the journey complete, but it is a very robust and exciting journey. And, as Naki was talking about, it's that availability and that willingness to try and figure out new things, right? Is this possible? No, why not? Should we be doing this? Do we need these tools? What else do we need to be coming up with? And I think, and without getting too mushy here, that's, that California way, which I love to talk about. It's like, we are the first to do, that environmental justice policy with the Coastal Commission, or the 30/30, it talks about, equity and accessibility. And that really is a reflection of those values. And I'm excited, again, we're still very much in that starting journey, but it's exciting because there is a willingness throughout, I think, the agencies to try new things and to find those new paths forward. And it's been, everybody from Melissa Miller Hanson back in 2008, when I started brand new into the into the field with the Marine Life Protection Act initiative. Everybody throughout, with the Coastal Conservancy, with Coastal Commission, with the renewal of the State Lands Commission environmental justice policy. I'm pretty sure I work with everybody here, and it's exciting to see how much things have grown and changed even in the last couple of years. And I'm excited because I see that willingness to see where else we can challenge ourselves to go.
Yeah, and it's amazing, these professional networks, as folks move up their organizations and their careers, it's so critically important to have those baseline relationships, right, to support each other. I want to call on Melissa in just a little bit, and I've got a question for her, but let me get back to Amy. Amy, Coastal Conservancy is responsible for some of the most incredible acquisitions of coastal lands and for public benefit. And, that kind of space, at least as I've been educated, used to be considered almost like an old boys network. And that's something you came up and just reflect on your ascendance to lead the Coastal Conservancy and what it might mean to others to have a woman leading this work.
Yeah, I think land acquisition, similar to like the energy field. And then also I've worked a lot with wetlands restoration, which I necessarily think of as male dominated, but working with dredge sediment, working with dredging in ports and marinas, federal navigation channels, that is an extremely male dominated field. So it's been an interesting journey over the years. And I think a lot has changed pretty quickly, over the past decade or so, in terms of both women moving into leadership roles and a greater diversity in terms of racial, ethnic diversity across these fields. And I guess first, I just really want to thank people who came before us. I mean, I see Annie Nodoff among the attendees, and 40 years with NC, and she was on the board of the Coastal Conservancy, just moved to the Coastal Commission. And, it's leaders like her, women like her, who have inspired me, and men who have inspired me. Sam Schuckett was the previous executive officer and a really wonderful person to work for. Is on the Coastal Conservancy. I'm just hopeful I can pass those sorts of inspirations along to some of our newer, younger staff at the Coastal Conservancy. And similar to the Coastal Commission, the Conservancy, we went through a JEDI guidelines process.
Amy's freezing up a little bit.
The Coastal Commission's lead, and I led that effort. There were little challenges along the way, and really, thanking Mars for her leadership on that effort. And it has made a huge difference within our agency for our staff. And Milwaukee inspired me to look back at CalHR data for the Conservancy, and we have had a 21 percentage point increase in racial diversity over the past 5 years. So we went from 32% non-white to in 2017 to 51% last year. And it, just a huge effort went into that in terms of increasing diversity of our applicant pools and really thinking through the hiring and retention work.
That's so energizing to hear. And, from Governor Newsom himself on down, we've been really focused on stretching our recruitment to attract just this incredibly talented array of Californians into jobs in these agencies. we inherit agencies that, have traditionally been male dominated, that have been primarily white. And of course, that's not because there aren't incredibly talented, qualified folks that are not white men, but it's because of systemic inequities, right? And so, Amy, the work that you all have done in terms of building those applicant pools, recruiting, stretching yourselves out of the traditional networks to really capture just the broad talent across California is really inspirational. I know it's what we all aspire to do. Melissa, Fish and Game. I think Fish and Game Commission almost predates the state of California. So it's really traditional and old as an institution. And of course, when we think about fishing and hunting game, traditionally male. So it seems like there's been a sea change at the Fish and Game Commission, just in terms of the breadth of your commissioners and the work. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also your journey within that?
Thank you, Wade. Yes, the California Fish and Game Commission, along with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, both began from the same Board of Fish Commissioners over 150 years ago. So long history there, and a long history of, as you say, lack of diversity and in fact discrimination against certain groups of people through its history. And we've worked really hard since I've been with the commission, and I know it started before me. We've worked really hard at really transforming the culture of the organization and the work that we do with our stakeholders and the people who care about the fish and wildlife resources of the state. Transformation is a transformational leadership is really, it's a choice, right? It's a choice we as leaders make about whether we want to create that more diverse and inclusive, equitable organization. And I know that we're celebrating Women's History Month, but in the Fish and Game Commission, not only are we trying to encourage more women to become involved in the work of the commission, but a whole range of constituents, whether it's men, women, binary, Jewish, Catholic, you name it, whatever. It doesn't matter. We want to see a greater diversity of people engaged and involved and out enjoying the wonderful, beautiful, amazing environment that we have here in California, the natural resources, the ecosystems, and the species that live within them. And so we have made a concerted effort to really walk the talk, right? We don't just talk about, but we're making changes, talking about our own internal biases and how do we address those and how do we ensure that those are not perpetuated. Really critical to part of that is, as individuals, we can make a change in an organization, but even with individuals desiring to make changes, if there's not also an organizational shift in the policies, the procedures, the mechanics of how an organization functions, you can still have biases embedded in the organization that are unintentional, perhaps, but they still have an impact. And so we've also been exploring those, and our commissioners have been incredibly supportive and really pushing us as a team to move forward with our justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts on both of those fronts, individually, as an organization, and in the work with our constituents. And so we really make a strong effort to engage everyone as supporters and practitioners of this kind of thinking, and helping us identify where the organization might be lacking and where we can make improvements. And it's really exciting to have a set of commissioners who are just so engaged and supportive of that effort. It's a conversation that we have at every commission meeting, and we typically have a conversation of some sort related to JEDI, oftentimes show a video, and just appreciate the support that we receive from our commissioners. They're really pushing it. And super exciting is that we are about to hire a contractor to help us develop our justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion plan, get that finished by the middle of next year. So that's super exciting for us.
Wow. I'm so glad that you raised that point around changing systems within our institutions. We talk a lot now about operationalizing equity or institutionalizing equity. It's one thing to talk about it as a priority, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's another thing to actually shift the way we work to actually, achieve that. And Melissa, on a personal note, I've noticed that you've been really engaged in planning and actively supporting these different months where we've lifted up aspects of our diversity, whether it was Black History Month just last month, or our Pride in June, or Native American Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month. I think it means a lot as a leader that you actually show up for those other groups, that you're not necessarily part of that affinity group. Can you just talk about what drives that?
I wish I could say I fully understand or appreciate where that came from. My mother says I've always had a very strong sense of justice and right and wrong since I was a very small child. And I grew up in some very poor neighborhoods that were predominantly Hispanic or Black. And myself encountered a lot of discrimination and gender-related inequity and violence. And as I've gotten older, I realized that I'm moving into positions where I have the ability to help change that and help create a different society. Outside of work, I do other things, but I can start here in my office and with my team and with my commissioners and our stakeholders, and I can help with the agency and all of the great work that you're doing. And then I move off and I do things off on my own as well. I don't know where that comes from, but it's important to me because I have seen a lot of inequity in my lifetime, and not just against women, but against Jews and Blacks and anyway, a whole range of classes of people. And it just doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. And I want to change that.
That's so powerful. And thank you for sharing that. You know, another point you made is leaders have a choice, and actually, you know, doing nothing or being neutral on the topic of modernizing our institutions is its own choice, right? So by stepping up there and to change systems, but also show up across our agency as a leader, I think is really, really important. I want to turn to Jen Eckerly, and because I work so closely with you, I'll ask you a tough question. When we were preparing for this discussion, you know, one of the questions I had is, you know, what does it mean that now women are leading these institutions, or how does it change the way these institutions operate? And I think it was Amy who said, you know, be careful, Wade, in terms of generalizing, you know, like women leadership or a female style of leadership, because we bring our own selves, and, you know, we have many dimensions, gender being just one of them. But at the same time, given that these were, you know, exclusively male-led institutions, it seems to me a big deal that women now lead these institutions and can work to, you know, build that network of female leaders. So just reflect on what it does or doesn't mean, you know, to be a woman leader leading on these issues with others here.
Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot. First, I just want to say what a privilege it is to be here today with this incredible group of leaders, most of which I consider very close friends and colleagues and mentors. So it's just an honor to be here. To answer your question, Wade, I want to normalize being a human. I want to show everyone that it's okay to be a leader and also a parent and a caregiver. And I care deeply about protecting the ocean, and I work really hard, but I don't want to hide that I am a human that is juggling all of the things and leading a really complicated, busy, and messy life. And I want it to be okay to be a whole person at work. And I think one of the bright spots of COVID is that there was no avoiding that, right? People were taking Zoom meetings with kids in their laps and grandparents walking in the background and dogs barking. And it was really hard. And it also allowed a window into our humanity, and it gave us grace to do our best at our work while trying to balance our personal lives. And that became a point of connection and not something to hide. So it's really important to me. I want to set an example and a culture where we're committed to making meaningful change to protect the planet, and that the person is more important than the work. So I want my team and my peers and myself to not feel ashamed that we're not doing enough when we have to take our kids to the dentist, when we have to care for a sick parent or manage a loss. And I want to lead with compassion and empathy. And I want that to be seen as a strength and not a weakness. And the idea of work-life balance doesn't really exist in these leadership roles, right? But making it acceptable to be a whole person at work allows us to get just a little bit closer, and it gives permission to our teams and to our colleagues to do the same. So that is a huge priority for me and what I want to institutionalize as a leader here.
Well, so powerful. And I really appreciate, Jen. You're getting a lot of hearts and claps on the emojis and, just in terms of being brave and confident in bringing your authentic self to work. And I think that does my own take is that does so much to actually support your team across the Ocean Protection Council and further. I'll open it up to others. This question of, what does or doesn't, you all being women leaders leading these institutions mean currently or for the future? I'm going to pick on somebody if nobody speaks up. Amy.
Well, I'll dive in. I just wanted to, Jen, that was really fabulous. I want to say that. Just being able to be authentic, like to be ourselves and to encourage other people to be authentic. I mean, each person is coming to this as an individual. And I heard this really great, I think it was a podcast about transgender issues. And, you can go through life carrying a bag of rocks. And at some point, you're either going to need to set down that bag of rocks or you're going to have to stop. Like you just can't do it anymore.
Amy keeps freezing as she's like articulating a really profound point.
Discrimination, whether this is about being transgender, setting that down and being able to present to the world your true authentic self and have that be celebrated and supported.
Thank you, Amy. There's great questions coming in. So we have over 400 people in this discussion now. And if you have questions or thoughts, please put them in Q&A. Emily asks, can someone reflect on the wage gap for women and people of color in this field? Tough question, but I want to acknowledge that.
I can jump into that, Wade. I actually was, the one good thing about Zoom meetings is you can kind of do a little scrolling. I'll share in the chat an article that I found about this through the Verde report. And one of the challenges is, of course, that maybe more women are getting involved in the field, but whether or not they're getting paid the same as men is still a challenge. And there's a pledge that this the Verde report requests folks to take, and that is taking a hard look at your organization's pay scales and looking at opportunities for advancement, which I think really brings to the fore is the point of why it's so important for women to be at the higher levels in very powerful boards and commissions. Typically, natural resources and real estate has been a male-dominated kind of arena. And we've all been in rooms where that's the case. But if you're not, some people say if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that's the case when you don't have a level of cultural competence, leading and drilling down deep on issues that are really important to communities. One of my colleagues that I often commiserate with is Irma Munoz, who runs Mujeres de la Tierra. And we often talk about how do we support each other as women leaders and women of color leaders, and how do we bring the next generation forward to be able to take those next steps and have those bold conversations. It's not always easy to bring up issues when you're the only person in the room speaking on them. But one of the things that I've noticed is that once someone starts the conversation, it continues to build and flow. And with the Coastal Commission, I've seen a huge difference where, you know, there may have been a time when I was kind of one of the few people that would speak up on EJ issues. And now, you know, everybody is doing that. The staff is doing that. We have sections within our staff reports specifically dedicated to environmental justice. And when we don't, the public asks, well, where's the section on EJ, right? Where is it? And so I think that this issue of pay gap is really challenging. In that report that I shared, or the link that I shared, there's also a challenge around the pay gap between people of color and those who are not. And there is kind of a silver lining in that women are doing better in environmental fields, but one area that still lags behind significantly is people of color whose opportunities. So women of color are not necessarily getting the same opportunities. And so we have to really take a look at that and understand why that is and address it head on. And it means, you know, whether it's on appointments, whether it's on hiring and grooming folks for the next position of leadership, it's tremendously important for all of us as leaders to keep in mind as we're building our teams.
Absolutely. Really helpful. And I note great use of the chat to share that article, Effie. So thank you for that. I want to ask a question. Nicole identifies herself as a Latina, and she is an attorney with a master's in environmental law and policy. And she's just interested in how someone in her position finds out about attorney positions within our agency. And Nowaki, I think it's a great opportunity to talk about the Career Counseling Center and opportunities because this is something we're working on proactively.
Yeah, so that's funny that you should bring that up. So we are working on this new career center, and it's sort of a one-stop shop where, you know, folks like yourself who are interested in trying to see what's out there and, you know, what kind of internships, entry-level positions, you know, the full range from, you know, scientist to attorney to you know, accounting, can go to our new career center physically, or you can, you know, email them. I'll drop the email in the chat, and make an appointment and find out about these jobs, and they can kind of really walk you through it soup to nuts.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. So basically, it's an opportunity for, you know, really anyone across California to understand what opportunities exist in the institutions that are led by the women here or across our agency. State government can be hard to break into. We have some complicated hiring processes and rules. And the Career Counseling Center is all about just being able to get on the phone with that HR person, professional, and say, hey, this is my background. What kind of opportunities might I look into? So it's meant to be really informal and just what we hope is a good opportunity to attract a much broader range of people to work at our agency. So I'm really excited about that. Some really good questions about data. One on, are you all tracking the gender balance within your entities and how that's going? And then Katie asked a question around collecting data on retention of women and people of color in the agencies. Recruitment is great and it's one thing, but obviously retention and the support of career development is another. Anybody want to take those questions on regarding data, but also retention and promotion?
I will. I just to say that we are tracking those things because it is a priority, at least for the Coastal Commission, and I'm sure for most of the folks here, to track those, you know, where we are in terms of, you know, not just the gender, but also, you know, racial diversity of our staff. So we're paying very close attention. And I just couldn't agree more that recruitment is one piece of it and it's critical, but the retention piece is also really critical. And that's something that, frankly, we're working on. We're trying to do a better job internally of supporting our staff, especially our staff of color, to, make sure that they feel that they have a place where they're welcomed and heard and comfortable to do their best work. And it's a challenge, and we're coming up with ideas right now in terms of how to do that, and having mentorship available and working towards affinity groups within the staff. There's a bunch of ideas that we're working on right now, but I had to just agree that retention piece is something we all need to be doing probably a better job of, because we can hire these great people, but if they don't stay, we don't get the benefit of their experience and their perspective. So it's a critical piece for at least the Coastal Commission.
And I would just add too, to riff off of what Dr. Huckelbridge just said, is a big part of that retention is having and constantly updating your upward mobility program in your agency, so that your staff have a path forward and resources to be able to move up in leadership positions and increasing responsibilities as part of your agency. And that's a great way to encourage retention as well as succession planning too.
Yeah, and Wade, if I could add to that, I mean, this is one of the issues as a small agency. We have 11 positions, right? So we don't have a ton of upward mobility opportunities in our organization, and yet we have employees who remain with us. We have a current employee who's been here for over 25 years. And so people have a tendency to stay. And part of that is not only the work that we're doing, but it's also, at least in the most recent hires in the last 5 years, we're doing things internally, again, talking about that transformational leadership and changing the way the organization functions. And so we've increased transparency in decision-making, which research shows increases employee trust and their happiness with their job, their engagement with their job. It also can help advance more innovative thinking. And we have been creating more opportunities in our workflow for cooperation rather than a more competitive environment. Again, those kinds of structures tend to recognize all types of contributions to a final product, and then focusing on the final product as opposed to the individual who contributed, right? It's an entire team effort that is contributing to those final products. Adding DEI criteria to our employee and manager performance reviews, right? How are they contributing? How is their manager encouraging it? Implementing reward structures that include those kinds of concepts and ideas of equity and cooperation. There's a whole lot of things as an organization, if you want to transform the organization, that help lead to that, not only a more gender equitable, but an equitable organization overall for whatever class you're speaking about.
I want to raise a point that Ryan brought up in the question and answer, and he says, they say that typically in the state's HR systems, it's very common to just have a gender choice of male or female, but it doesn't leave space for folks that identify as transgender or non-binary to identify themselves. And therefore, we really don't know about the progress of bringing transgender, non-binary leaders into state service. So question is, how might you or we as leaders work towards making all genders recognized and celebrate the diversity that we bring to this table? And I'll note it is, we're in the week of Transgender Day of Visibility. So it's a timely question. I'll just say, on behalf of our agency, but also I think I could speak for the governor, this is really critically important to us because we want to ensure the inclusivity across all conceivable differences, including gender identity. So I'll take as homework this question around how do we, in a respectful, non-intrusive way, collect data on those folks that don't identify as male or female so that we can recognize how we're doing attracting talented people with that identity.
Wait, I would just... No, Amy, you go ahead.
Sorry, Secretary Crowfoot, I was just going to add to that. I think one thing we are seeing here is that some of the smaller agencies within the state of California which is, I mean, well over, 200,000 employees total, very large agencies. Some of these smaller agencies can really drive change. And I think, the Coastal Commission with the EJ policy, the Conservancy's JEDI guidelines. I don't want to leave out any of the other agencies, but we are all like, even Fish and Game Commission with 11 employees can make a huge impact on the state overall. So this kind of question, it's the sort of thing that we could lead on and have impacts, across the DMV and Caltrans and,
Yeah. Shift the paradigm for
changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we're getting a couple of questions around, how do you interact, or do you interact with young women leaders or younger women either in this field? And there was a question around, are any of you open to being mentors, I should say? Because this probably speaks to that question around building a network where younger women see themselves, as potential leaders. Can any of you talk about this dimension?
I can. I've been fortunate to be, both be a mentee to women who came before me and then be a mentor. And it's one of the parts of my job that brings me the most joy, because I just enjoy. And I think a lot of it is that support that we were talking about earlier, providing support and encouragement, and for women coming up that they can do this, and to believe, I think sometimes a lot of the struggle that many of us face is the voice in our own head of, do I see myself here? Can I actually do this work? And providing, I had somebody and more than one person giving me support, and I want to pass that on, because it's just critical that people see themselves in these type of leadership jobs and believe in themselves and their abilities. And so I just encourage, I'm sure all of us in this room have had the opportunity to mentor women in our spheres, and I'm always open to that. I really, like I said, it brings me a lot of joy, but I think it's important too.
I agree.
I would just add too that if you have, I have very similar experiences to Dr. Huckelbridge, and I would just add that if you have the opportunity to also mentor young people who identify as male, that is a great way to showcase a different form of leadership and create allies. And I think our young people, especially, no matter how they identify, really appreciate having that relationship and being able to see different types of leadership and people in that leadership position, so that they can then create their own way of being a leader and where to be most effective given their individual lived experiences and backgrounds and academic experiences.
Absolutely.
If I could, Wade, just want to add for those who think, gosh, being a mentor, that sounds like an awful lot of work, and sometimes it can be, but it's also an incredibly rewarding opportunity. But even just basic encouragement on one-time conversations. Just learned a week ago that someone I'd had a conversation with a few months ago and had encouraged her, no, absolutely, you can do this. Here's the process. It's not as difficult as it sounds. I'll just walk you through it. I really encourage you to go try this out. I think you'll be successful. And I found out last week she did. She followed the advice and she got the job. And so even just those one-time moments where you take that extra 5 or 10 minutes to encourage someone a young person that you really want to help bring in, that at some point in time in the future is going to become a great leader, that's important too.
If I can just say, I think, I agree with everything that's been said. I think for me, it's been, particularly meaningful when I've been able to mentor young women of color, because I remember, feeling like, I needed to be quiet. I shouldn't really take up that much space. And to just really let them know, like, no, what you have, what you bring to the table, what you're thinking and feeling is important. And there is room and space for you and a place for you to grow. you know, and it's really worth finding that and really kind of raising your voice. So I wish somebody had said that to me when I was growing up, but, you know, which is something that I try to do now.
Wow. Mars.
Yes, you know, FA already mentioned Irma, but I will say that also as someone that benefited from her support, sometimes if you don't, you know, if you don't see yourself in it, you don't really see yourself in it, right? So if you don't see people that share your experience, your background, it doesn't even enter your mindset that you could be that person. So, you know, sometimes at the same time, and that's also a voice. Am I good enough to be a mentor? Do I know enough to be a mentor? And if you know a little bit more than the other person, or if you have a little bit more of experience, you can be that mentor. So don't, you know, don't think that it has to be something extra formal. And yes, there's fabulous formal programs. Personally, we're very involved with the Ray Fellowship on Ocean Leadership, but anybody can be a mentor, and just share that experience as little as you have it, because you don't know who's watching or listening that you could help out along the way.
And often the mentors learn just as much as the mentees.
Yes.
A lot of head nods there, and a lot of excited emojis. This has been such an energizing and inspirational conversation. We're coming to the top of the hour, which means we need to bring the discussion to conclusion. And it's a shame because there continue to be great questions streaming in from participants. I want to thank all of you, not only for joining us here today, but for all of the work that you do. And I want to give you a final opportunity as we close out the discussion, sort of key takeaways or any sort of final thoughts that you have. You have, you know, several hundred people on as part of this discussion, obviously across gender and all aspects of identity. So what would you say, just generally speaking, to these folks who have listened to the conversation for the last 60 minutes?
I'll start. I would just say to trust your instincts and to find your voice, right? That your approach to leadership might not look the same as that of your male or other counterparts. And that doesn't mean that it's any less effective or impactful. It just might look different. And so there's so much power in trusting your instincts and your path forward.
Another way of saying that in my words was continue to be your brilliant and feisty self and ask lots of questions. Like why? Why is it that way? Why do we do it that way? Why can't we?
I would just add, I like to think about bringing people together to help problem solve and make decisions as a kaleidoscope of experiences and backgrounds. All of that contributes to a really beautiful result. And I would also just mention that to especially our young people who've been through and will go through so much with COVID and climate, is take care of your mental health. That is first priority, and that is going to be key for you all to be able to help us solve these really critical issues that we're facing right now.
I guess I would take a slightly different tact and just to say, I want to second all the things that folks have said. I also want to say we really need you in this place, in this space. Like, we have a lot of really hard work to do to protect our coast moving forward with climate change and sea level rise. And we desperately need all of you who are interested in this field and love these places to, you know, raise your hand, you know, apply for the job, take the leadership position, you know, whatever it is in, you know, that makes sense for you. We need you. So please help us.
And if I could, to build on what Kate just said, for those folks who aren't looking for jobs or who aren't looking for a new career, it's really important to get young people out into the environment, help introduce them to the outdoors and the activities that perhaps they don't have opportunities through other avenues, because it's those experiences as youngsters and that appreciation that grows over time that's going to help them help us do a better job in protecting our natural resources.
I'll jump in and say, share the power, share the mic, share the opportunities. And because I cannot leave without saying this, join us on April 11th for Ocean Day in California, Sacramento. You might get to see some of the folks on here.
What date is that, Mars?
April 11th in Sacramento, California, Ocean Day.
And I would say probably most everyone will be there. Well, listen, thank you so much once again for all that you do for California, for your leadership, for your insight, your inspiration here. I know this has been a really meaningful conversation for me and hundreds of others. Just a note, if you've tuned in, we will have a recording available. So if you go on to resources.ca.gov or the link that Geeta will soon provide in the chat, you'll be able to find a recording of this that you can share with others. Have a great, and I should say, if you have suggestions for other conversations like this, please reach out to us at the agency. Have a great week, and we look forward to continued shared progress on all of these priorities. Take care.